Today, our guest is Andrew Shipilov, and we'll be talking about strategy and how this is shaping the future of health, technology, and sustainability. Stay with us. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the CRUZAMENTO Podcast. In today's show, we'll talk about the intersection of technology, healthcare, and sustainability. My name is André Correia, and together with me is my friend and co-host, Daniel Guedelha.
Hello, and welcome to another show of CRUZAMENTO Podcast. Our guest today is Andrew. Andrew, our usual first question. In 30 seconds, who is Andrew?
Well, thanks a lot for this invitation. Andrew is a professor of strategy at INSEAD. I joined INSEAD in 2005. For those who may not know, INSEAD is a business school in France, also in Singapore, in San Francisco, and Abu Dhabi. So our two main campuses are in Europe and Asia, and the other two are sort of less large. But at this really interesting place in the forest of Fontainebleau, I've been teaching strategy and innovation since 2005. Currently, I teach in a lot of executive education programs. Some of my favorites are managing partnerships and strategic alliances. I direct that. Blue Ocean Strategy, I direct that program as well. And I also work with companies in two capacities. One, I work with them as an advisor, so I help them develop strategies for real and not for the academic purposes. And the other capacity is I help them build executive education programs which are customized to their needs. So companies come to us, they have a specific need of talent development, and we create something which is uniquely for them. I write academic articles for academics. I also try to translate them to the practitioners. So I recently, well, not recently, a few years ago, wrote a book about network advantage, how to unlock value from your alliances and partnerships, which is obviously I teach in my programs at INSEAD. So that's Andrew.
Really great to hear all that, Andrew. Thanks a lot for the introduction. And you've mentioned you consult with companies, focusing a little bit on startups and smaller companies now, and these are often seen as more agile and innovative than large corporations. How can big corporations foster a culture of innovation and collaboration that allows them to keep pace with these small competitors? And do you observe a shift there?
Well, it's funny you should ask this question, because just yesterday we released the report with Soprasteria, where we did quite a bit of digging in this question. And essentially what we did, we asked the corporates and we asked startups in Europe about how they felt about collaborating with one another. What were some of the key challenges, and in which industries these collaborations happened, in which countries companies or startups were more or less happy with that collaboration. So essentially we took a big thermometer and tried to measure the temperature all around Europe. So we did have some really interesting findings. Maybe, I'm not sure how obvious that is, but there is an increasing trend of startups working with corporates working with startups, and they're figuring out how to get things done. So we did not really have the answers in any country saying, oh, the majority of companies doesn't work with startups, everybody's unhappy, things are breaking up. No, in fact, in general, in Europe, there is a pretty significant change over the past, a decade, I would say, where, corporates feel it's okay, it's important to work with startups. Startups do work with corporates, and there is this whole ecosystem of startup and corporate collaborations where there are third-party advisors who help to get that done. Corporates set up accelerators. Startup and their business plans, they obviously target corporates. But the most surprising thing for me was that there's still geographical difference. Literally, in some countries, you see a lot more, a lot higher rates of collaborations than in the others. And I'll just ask you guys a question back. So, which do you think are the two countries where there is the lowest rate of collaboration between the startups and the corporates?
Interesting. The lowest one, I will put the other way around. So for me, the highest might be US, kind of North America.
We did not do US. It was just a European survey.
Okay, that's a good point. The lowest collaboration. So if you are asking the question, is it France, Germany, a big country?
Well, France is in the middle. So France is in the middle of Europe. France is okay. So the French.
I'll go with Switzerland.
Okay, Switzerland. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. So Norway and Germany.
Okay, the lowest.
The lowest, yeah. So it was interesting that Germany and Norway could do a lot better. Now let me flip the question. Where do you think is the highest rates of collaboration?
I would say Switzerland and maybe the smaller countries. I would tend to say the Baltic countries, maybe.
Okay, UK and Italy. We still counted UK as a part of Europe, so okay. we were nice. We imagined that the Brexit didn't happen, and sort of UK was a part of the service. So UK and Italy, highest rates of collaboration. Norway, Germany, lowest rates of collaboration. And we've been doing some kind of trying to understand why that may be. There's still, one would need to do a lot more digging, but it seems to us that in Norway and in Germany, culturally, still this idea of not invented here is still pretty strong and still pretty prevalent, where, the corporates basically, maybe it is of the structure of the industry or just, national kind of mental maps, but they do feel that all the best innovations come from them. I mean, speaking about the corporates, and they are less likely to be reaching out and work with startups. In the UK and Italy, I mean, you would think that economically, in terms of how the economies are structured, I mean, UK is obviously super liberal economy. In Italy, there is more regulation. So it's not really about kind of liberalism versus regulation. But maybe in Italy, it is quite possibly because there's quite a few kind of, medium-sized corporates, which are sort of already woke up to some, understanding that there are significant constraints as to how they grow, how they could innovate, and they started to work with the startups. And then the UK, I mean, UK is like US in the sense, to you, Daniel, the first country where the startup corporate collaboration came into mind was US, and UK is like US in terms of the business culture and kind of approach of kind of learning and being able to kind of pick up ideas and use the ideas no matter where these ideas from. But Norway, Germany, they could do better. In fact, what was funny is the office which helped us run this whole survey was Sopra Steria in Norway. So obviously it was a pan-European initiative, but for that this was an interesting wake-up call. But I think the other thing which positively surprised me, if you look at this sector, right? If you look at sectors, you would say, what would be the sectors where the startups and the corporates would work the most with one another? Sort of media advertising comes first, and this is, pretty clear why that would be. Because, this is sort of digital bits and bytes, and the business model is, I can work anywhere and I can come up with a digital product, get sold through the corporate. That's easy. What was really, really cool is that now in public sector, in healthcare, defense, these are still sectors where there is increasing uptake of collaboration between corporates and the startups. And the moment kind of, defense, the government, the healthcare, they start working with startups, to me, that means that already you have quite a broad acceptance through the economy as a whole about the importance of these startups and the corporates' collaborations.
Interesting. Andrew, just a clarification. Therefore, here we're talking about the collaboration between corporate and startups, and not necessarily if the country itself is innovative or is able to bring innovation, creativity from the companies themselves, right? The report.
So basically what we did, we did a survey and we knew which countries those respondents were coming from, right? And we asked, if you're the corporate, how far, how long ago did you collaborate with a startup? What did you feel about these collaborations? Would you be planning to collaborate in the future? We asked similar questions to the startups. So this was not about, is your country more innovative than not? So that was not the question we asked. We just knew, okay, so maybe, if you guys are sitting in Switzerland and you were representing a corporate, organization, then we would ask you about that specific corporate firm.
Yeah, got it. And picking maybe on that one, and we like to give examples, specific examples in our podcasts. So maybe if you want to pick an example of a tech company and maybe a company in the health space, which are the examples where you will say those corporate companies, they are doing excellent job from an innovation, creativity point of view themselves, from within?
So the interesting example, there is a company called Closed Loop Medicine in the UK, and the business idea there is to combine wearables with drugs, in the sense that, let's say, so the use case, let's say you've got hypertension, right? So and we know that this could be treated with the chemical, but you still need to lead an active lifestyle. And maybe if you lead a more active lifestyle over time, you may need less drugs to manage your blood pressure. So they have a range of products which are like that. In the sense, it's the combination of a molecule with an app solution, which allows you to track your physical activity. And we also know that, of course, when somebody is asked to track something like the weight or the fitness, people are more likely to actually do something about it, because when you wake up in the morning, you stare in the scale and say, my weight is like, 100, 200 grams higher than it was last week, then, maybe you would eat less sugar. Or if you say that, okay, I moved this week less than I moved the week before, then you would actually, go exercise, go for a walk, do a treadmill, and so forth. So they're working with the hospitals, and and there are many startups like this in the UK which are doing a lot of running clinical trials in the with the hospitals to understand how this package of drug and app, how would that affect the ability of people to well, first of all, manage their condition. You don't want your blood pressure to go unchecked, but to actually be your own doctor, in the sense that, when you exercise, when you move around, you are treating yourself. Because take all those other conditions, like, take osteoarthritis, right? If you, have a back pain, back pain, how do you treat back pain? Well, we could do yoga, or you could take a pill. The problem, and the older you are, the more you would have probably to do both. But if you do have a device and the technology which sort of nags you and suggests you that to do the exercise on a regular basis, maybe you would use less of the painkillers and more of the exercise. And overall, that would be good for you as a patient, because we don't want the drugs. And that's good for the health system, because you don't need to see the doctors, and you don't need, the social security doesn't need to spend money on paracetamol, or all those other drugs, or even stronger painkillers. And that's pretty much good for everybody. So this is just one example. I mean, I wouldn't say that the closed loop medicine is sort of the best out there, but this is just one of the examples as to how these collaborations could work. Another collaboration I could give in Norway, I wouldn't give the name, but they essentially, the startup was helping the hospital to build an internal reporting system. Because you can think of, how do we improve healthcare? Well, one is obviously the patient kind of drug interface, but the other is internal operations of the hospitals, right? Mm-hmm. Because they have, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of document stuff flowing through, and the slower the stuff is flowing through, the more expensive it is for the country and for the healthcare to operate at hospitals. So there's quite a few startups which help hospitals to manage their internal operations, not just like in bookkeeping, but also managing the customer journey and the exchange of the digital files around the customers. So this is another area where collaboration between the startup and the corporate could create value tomorrow.
And I'll pick up on that word tomorrow, Andrew. And there are
today.
No, but it's very interesting, because a lot is already happening around the collaborations. And thank you very much also to bring up that report, because it kind of gives us an overview of how geographically this collaboration is dispersed. But on a macro level, and looking to tomorrow, would you like to tell us a little bit more about how do you see strategy, especially between tech and health companies, for the next 10 years? And are they adapting to this fast-paced, or will they adapt to this fast-paced world? And are they equipped to cope with this?
Well, I think they have no choice. I mean, in fact, it's like, it's the question is, would they adapt? They will adapt, because the societal pressure will be so high, just simply because of we will have more people who live longer, and that's obvious, right? And that's good. But the longer we live, the more chronic conditions we have. And but again, the best cure for many of them is the person taking charge of his or her health. But how do you help people to take charge of their health? And this is where the digital comes in, right? Because the digital is this whole kind of set of technologies which allows people to track their mobility, track their behavior. So actually you have the data of how many steps you had, how many calories you burned, and so on and so forth. And then the drugs, it's I would think of this as some kind of very important aid, right? Because if I got hypertension, then yes, I could go exercise, but still in the short run I would still have hypertension. So the drugs and the personalization of the medicine is going to help me take charge of my own health. And obviously, clearly, we're talking about prevention. The moment you've got something which is much more complicated and serious, like cancer or diabetes, this is where technology could help with compliance as well, right? Because compliance of treatment, and there's a lot of technologies out there right now which would monitor the drug regimen that you're following. And unfortunately, the more complex is the disease, the more complex is the drug regimen. But you can follow that, and you can have all of the information on your fingertips, and your doctor will have that as well. And and this is not, we don't need to be thinking about what would happen in 10 years. This is all happening now. And given all the pressures, on the one hand, demographically live longer with chronic conditions, on the other hand, shrinking social security budgets, the personalized health, the digital and the combination of digital with drugs actually is already helping people to manage these situations. Now, I think the interesting question comes. And now everybody, I think every industry I teach, on many of them, people are worried about those big players like Amazon, Google, Facebook entering their markets. I taught in the financial sector, financial services industry companies some time ago. They were all worried about this GAFAM entrance. When I teach health people in healthcare, they're also worried about that. So it looks like, we've got those, horrible boogie people out there which could enter any industry and sort of disrupt that. And I think that's a general worry across a number of industries. And if this worry is across a number of industries, that tells me it's not going to happen for all of them. Because, I just simply cannot imagine how a large organization like Amazon could be present everywhere. And I tell you, as a customer of Amazon, yes, as a B2C customer, they're really good. I love them. I do my shopping with them. As a B2B customer, I'm not happy with them. Amazon Web Services, I had quite a few issues with them with billing and stuff. And it's just they're becoming. Amazon is becoming so bureaucratic on that end, which tells me that if they have issues with bureaucracy on the size of Amazon Web Services, and it's difficult to deal with them because their billing system is set up in a particular way, and there's no way they could issue the bill in different format. I mean, how can they enter healthcare? How can they enter banking? How can they enter everything and outcompete everybody else? So this is, I would not worry too much about those big organizations coming and disrupting everything under the sun, including healthcare and financial services.
Fair enough, Andrew. Fair enough. And as we talk about these tech companies, now specifically on the data analytics and artificial intelligence, can you speak to the role that data analytics and artificial intelligence are playing in improving healthcare? What are your
views? So this is where these kind of companies like Amazon, Microsoft can be helpful, but not as the competitors in that market, but rather as the infrastructure providers, right? And this would be a much cleverer model on their end if they create cloud and computational solutions so that the others, the specialists of that sector, can build on that. And if I were advising Microsoft or Amazon, this is what I would suggest. Don't enter financial services, don't enter healthcare, but create the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure, and the kind of run faster than your competition to be able to cater to the specialists in that market. educate those specialists, being those startups or the corporates. So think of yourself more as a provider of plumbing, of the utility, but it's an interesting plumbing utility. You could still charge an arm and a leg for that. This is not your kind of cable. This is the computational infrastructure, and this is where you would be able to achieve your competitive advantage.
And Andrew, as healthcare is becoming more reliant on technology, from your point of view, what impacts do you think this will have on the healthcare workforce? Not talking about a little bit more on the talent side of things. Are we at the risk of losing essential human touch in healthcare?
So I don't think so, because some of the most difficult tasks to outsource to the robot are the human care tasks, right? So imagine, how could you outsource, how would you outsource to AI some kind of, physical patient care in the hospital, right? So kind of, putting in catheters in the human bodies, or or even talking to people and kind of comforting them. I mean, the robots cannot do that, and there is no way they can. I read that in Japan, you have all those things which sort of do that, but this is more like still science fiction and very niche. These are the most kind of, if my kids were looking at like two different careers, working as a personal caregiver in the hospital or a paralegal, I would in fact go, become the healthcare worker and not the paralegal, because paralegals are likely to be replaced by ChatGPT, because what do the paralegals do? They essentially go through all these databases of court documents and trying to understand what the precedents are. Now, that job, it actually has zero human contact. This is a contact with basically, it's basically a human Google kind of thing, right? And now this human Google is being replaced by ChatGPT. This is where I would worry a lot. So, and also in healthcare, if your work really involves data retrieval and data analysis, there would be fewer and fewer people who would be necessary for that. If your job involves actually interacting physically with the person and caring for them in the medieval sense of caring, where actually do something with the body, then I don't think your job is at risk.
Very interesting, Andrew. And that brings me to another thoughts, the fact of the word of trust and ethical decision. So do you think that we can trust technology to make ethical decisions, namely in the healthcare space, or will there be always a need of human intervention?
Well, I think they would always need to have a need for human intervention, just simply because people need to trust the system, right? They need to be able to understand why. And this is, we see that all the time in recruiting right now, right? Because as you know, all of these algorithms, right, in terms of going through CVs and analyzing the candidates and shortlisting them, people ask why was my CV not selected? And if all there happens is, there is a neural network on the background and we don't know what's happening inside the neural network, people still want to know why. And if you chose to treat me in a particular way, I would like to know why. And in fact, as a patient, I may be need to go see one or two or three doctors and not just one to prescribe something for me. But if under the guise of all those three doctors, there's the same algorithm which tells me, yes, you need that sort of that treatment, then I would be worried about it, because I don't know what's inside the black box. Computers never going to give you empathy, because that's a big philosophical discussion, of course. What is empathy? Is it just information that we give? It sort of soothes us, or is it still involves something human? And health is about human touch. And this is why I don't think that, kind of in terms of where we think, the way I think about this kind of, AI versus human is they have to augment one another. And there's been a lot of research also in strategy right now, which looks at how different organizations adopt those AI tools, and how do the workers or the employees feel about AI tools, and how do sort of the customers experience those AI interactions. And the kind of the verdict, I think, to me is more or less clear, in a sense. You need the hybrid, you need the symbiosis between the human and the machine, because the machine can help you narrow the space of the solutions, right? So your ChatGPT is your paralegal, or in the sense of a doctor, so they could narrow the machine can narrow the search space, and then within that search space already you decide, but then you have to choose between one or two or three alternatives as opposed to, you know, tens of thousands or more different alternatives. So again, I would not be worried about, you know, young people entering healthcare, especially as doctors. But what I would really want them to learn is how to interact with the technology, right? So I would want them to understand how technology could augment them, in what way, how they could give better diagnosis, how they could administer better treatment. But I would not view them as sort of the profession which is close to extinction that will at some point be replaced by AI.
That's great, Andrew. Let me before a little bit the topic here and switch it slightly. One of the conversations we've been having with some of our guests as well is about local and global economy. So from a strategic point of view, many countries are now dependent on imports for critical goods, for example. How can we reduce this dependence and increase domestic production while still maintaining a globalized economy?
Well, I think we will always have globalized economy. Just the kind of the rules of engagement and globalization will change. And they're clearly, you know, in the way how the world economy is developing, there would be blocks, right? If you think about semiconductors, so, you know, I would think that this is one of those industries which is really kind of a canary in the gold mine about how the world economy is going to develop in the next decade. Is, you know, there will be some global supply chains, but then there will be significant redundancy. And there will be significant redundancy very simply because the governments don't want all the, you know, their chips to be produced in Taiwan. And you know, even though, and actually, if you look at Berkshire Hathaway, like Warren Buffett investment decision, I think 2 quarters ago he invested in TSMC, and last quarter he dumped that investment. And which is little unusual for Buffett, because Buffett tends to be, I think, and his team, they tend to be more long-term investors. But I can totally understand that two-mindedness, because on the one hand, TSMC is an amazing company, right? They're the best in terms of manufacturing semiconductors. They've got the infrastructure, their lowest cost, higher differentiation, wonderful organization. But then there's a huge geopolitical risk. And you know, you don't know when geopolitics will mean that there is no TSMC, and this is why Buffett is not investing there. But what was also interesting, all those decisions of the European governments to build fabs in their countries. But obviously, if you think about the semiconductor industry, in the ideal world, the TSMC solution is the best, because if we can build in a place like a giant fab for the rest of the world, this could be super efficient, super high quality, it's going to work, and the cost of the chip is going to go down. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to be like that, so we would have to build smaller fabs all around the world, which means that industry as a whole is going to be a lot less efficient. The cost of chips, the cost of iPhones, the prices of electronic devices will have to go up. And so if people are now asking, well, is inflation here to stay? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. No matter what the central bank is going to do, how high they hike the interest rates, unless, of course, they hike this to the rates where the economy is dead, but that's not the point, right? You can cure cancer by killing the patient, right? So that cancer is going to be cured, except the patient is going to be dead. But you know, there's nothing out there that would guarantee us or enable us lower inflation over the past 10 years, just simply because the global supply chains are becoming increasingly more redundant. And I don't think there is a way out of it in the semiconductors. I don't think there is a way out of it in healthcare. You know, countries want to manufacture components locally. And we all want that kind of, you know, security of supply. But then, unfortunately, and as a side effect, we have to accept higher prices.
And that's the forward-looking as well. We are about to finish our very good episode, Andrew. We want to thank you very much for your time and availability. So today we cover so many very interesting topics, from strategy, the importance of human touch, the connection between startups and big companies, how Europe and the different European countries, and a very good report we put on the notes, are doing towards that interaction, and the symbiosis between human and machines, how technology could augment human power. And Andrew, maybe here the last question. In case our audience would like to know more about you or to find you online, where should they look?
Well, they can just Google Andrew Shipilov. I'm, with that kind of combination of names, I'm probably unique in the world. Andrew Shipilov at INSEAD, and I have a website. And if they want to read the book, Network Advantage: How to Unlock Value from Your Alliances and Partnerships, it's on Amazon.
Andrew, thank you very much. To our listeners and viewers, if you like the discussion today, push the like button below and subscribe to our podcast. This way, more people will be able to find the show. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and other social networks. You are also invited to subscribe to our newsletter. Bye for now, and we hope to see you soon for another episode of the CRUZAMENTO Podcast.